And I will just welcome you to this casual, informal, slow start to the college advising process for the class of 2027. If we have not had a chance to meet, I'm Lauren Cook. I am your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising, although I know there's a lot of familiar faces in this class. I've worked with some older siblings, so excited to also have some familiar faces in the mix. I'm going to start with just a couple of housekeeping things. The default in my room is to be on mute. If you can just stay that way for the time being, I'm going to do a little content up top, and then we will open things up for questions. So whether you're more comfortable using the chat or raising your Zoom hand and asking questions live, you're welcome to unmute yourself at that point. But for now, please stay silent. I do have some content up top. I'm going to just run through a couple of frequently asked questions from this time of year around what to expect from the process with JCHS, especially in the next few months. A little bit about standardized testing, everyone's favorite topic. Some resources, especially if this is your first child, first in the family to head off to college, so that you know where to find some answers to things after today as well. And then just a couple of heads up on events this fall, just in the next few months, for you to have on your calendar. And a lot of these are on the main JCHS calendar as well. But just make sure you know what's there for you. And then we'll use the balance of the time for questions. And note that while the process won't formally start sort of one-on-one until December, I'm going to ask you to hold off on scheduling sort of one-on-one appointments with me for the next few weeks, because I do need to get the seniors' applications sort of launched and start to get them out the door. But I found that having this kind of touch base at the beginning of the fall is helpful, a soft launch, if you will, so we all feel like we have some sense of what's coming next. And we will end at 7:30. If you run out of questions before then, fantastic, but we will do a hard stop then and know that we have 2 years to continue chatting and talking and getting you through this process. And again, I am recording, so if you do have to pop off or the internet goes weird, I will send out a recording of this later this week. And then one last caveat to just address the elephant in the room. There's a lot of higher ed stuff in the news right now, obviously. We've got an administration that seems very interested in asserting themselves more with policy, less so with financial support. And I am not planning to get into all of that this evening unless there are some questions that come up during Q&A. The sand is sort of shifting under us. So you have the benefit of having a whole other year before you're applying to college, and we'll have a better sense of how some of these policy shifts and all the rest might impact you in the future. But I'm certainly happy to try my hand at prognosticating for at least today, August 18th, 2025. Who knows what tomorrow will bring. So for the time being, we're going to keep it closer to home and focus on what you're going to be doing at JCHS. So with that, welcome again. So the process at JCHS that you're going to be heading into the next few weeks and months is the same approach as all the other independent schools use in San Francisco and the Bay Area widely. We all sort of follow the same kind of best practices. And that is to have sort of a gentle start at the beginning of junior year, thinking about colleges, talking about colleges, but let you adjust to junior year as well, because a lot of folks are taking a step up in curriculum and rigor. You might be taking on some new leadership roles. So also get used to being an upper class person in the high school and settle into that as well. And this is a long-term project. So we are spending the next 2 years sort of thinking about what life is going to look like for you right after JCHS. So if you feel like you're not ready for this, it's fine. You're not going yet. So we're just going to start talking about it. And over the next 2 years, my hope is that you'll be doing some reflecting on yourself, students, and what you've gotten out of high school, what you still want to achieve as you're kind of halfway through at this point. Start envisioning the next phase of your life, and then try and find some options together that will fit that vision for yourself. And this is where I also want to pull over and remind us that there are many options post JCHS. We do have a chunk of students each year that head off to get 2-year degrees at community college, either thinking about credentials or transferring later on to a 4-year institution. We have students that enlist in the IDF. We have students that choose to do a gap year, whether that's in Israel or elsewhere, or working, close to home and saving some money for college. But the majority do choose a 4-year institution, and that is the sort of longest and most complicated of all of those options. So the communication you're going to get with me, the events we're going to be doing in the coming weeks and months, the focus of that at this point is really on the 4-year option to help you keep the widest number of doors open possible. But I do just want to acknowledge that we do have a lot of different pathways, and I'm here to help you with all of them. In the next 2 to 3 months, I'm going to invite you to start exploring colleges and doing that somewhat with me and somewhat independently. So everybody should be on score now, and you can start just keeping track of schools that maybe you've heard of already and interest you, things that your parents might be interested in for you, or places that you find while you're kind of searching on that software. And if you click the follow button, it's very much like social media, where it then kind of will keep that list for you of places that you're thinking about. You will also have access to college visits at JCHS, which I'll talk more about in a moment. And there's other vehicles for you to do some searching. The College Board website has a nice search engine called Big Future that I recommend. Some families choose, especially if you've got multiple kids, to purchase a copy of the Big Green FIS Guide to Colleges, which I think can be super useful. I also have copies in my office for folks to borrow. And, if you've got some family travels this year, wedding, bar mitzvah, vacation, and there's a college nearby, just go tool around that campus. You don't have to necessarily be interested in that specific school to get something out of just standing in the middle of a college campus and taking in what that feels like. And then December 3rd, which is a Wednesday night, will be our official kickoff, where we will meet like this on Zoom and have a longer conversation about getting things started. And after that, it's going to pick up steam real quick. You're going to do some questionnaires for me. We'll start having one-on-one appointments and get you some lists going as we head into the spring. So again, for now, I'll ask that we limit actual appointments in the next, 2 or 3 months, but please email me with questions. Juniors, if we haven't had a one-on-one conversation at any point, swing by my office, introduce yourself. I would love to start making sure I've got all my names and faces down. And hopefully I'll see you in the college visits as well and start to get a sense of what you might be thinking about. So about college visits to JCHS, those will start just after Labor Day, so that first full week of September. They typically take place in room 120, which is the room right off the main lobby. You might have had a tefillah in there, students, parents, you might have gone to like a mahjong game or something in there. So that's a community space there. And these are 30-minute appointments. So they're typically either the first 30 minutes of a block or the last 30 minutes of a block. And they're open to all 11th and 12th graders that want to attend them. And juniors, you are welcome. If you've got a study hall, and especially the first few weeks of school don't have a lot going on yet, come and just randomly sit in on some of the visits. And you don't have to know about the school to get something out of it. If you are interested in a school that is during a class time, that's fine. But you do need to tell your faculty member that you want to go to a college visit 24 hours in advance. So there's no showing up for AP Lang and saying to Ms. Foth, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. I need to go to a college visit right now. She probably won't let you go, and that would be within her right. But if you email her the day before and say, I'd really like to go here, NYU or Chicago or Lewis and Clark tomorrow, she will say, great. And you'll either miss the first half an hour or the last half an hour of class and head down to room 120. And the visits, and we've got maybe 35 or so schools booked so far. We'll typically top out somewhere between 60 and 70. But the ones that have booked so far are in score. There's usually something on kind of the right-hand navigation side that says office hours and visits, and they're all listed under there. And there's a little button that says register if you plan to go to one. So just click that button so I can get a sense. Some visits, like the University of Oregon, we fill the whole room, 20 kids trying back in there. Other visits, Franklin and Marshall, there might be 2 or 3, and that's fine. But it's good for me to have an advanced sense of things. So what happens in a college visit? This is where a representative from the college comes to JCHS and typically gives a little spiel, a little song and dance about their school, some of the basics, size, location, if there's any particular themes that they have in the type of education they offer. And you can get a glossy brochure and you can get on their mailing list, and it's a chance to ask questions. And it's a nice, quick, you don't even have to leave the building to be able to get a little bit of an overview on an institution. And I would say this is a great time to explore, especially junior year. If you've got some schools you're thinking about, great. If you have no idea, also great. Like, go to a big public university session, go to a small liberal arts college. If you're interested in the arts, go to an art school, go to a women's college. Like, there are lots of different types of institutions. And this year is all about shopping for you guys, right? And to think about, like, who might I be at these different places and what feels right for me. And know that I or another adult, there's a couple of times I have conferences or whatnot, so I might not be in the building, but I will most of the time be present. So if it is one of these smaller schools where it's like the rep and just one or two students that show up, I'll be there as an intermediary so it doesn't like feel too awkward to you, especially if it's like your first visit. So know that this is all a safe space. And it goes without saying that college reps coming to JCHS are our guests. These are often the folks who may be reading your application on down the road. They're usually responsible for JCHS and San Francisco schools writ large. So this is not like a Hakel where if you're whispering to a friend, I'm just going to tell you to be quiet and it's fine. This is like a one strike and you're out situation because we are trying to show the best side of JCHS to our visitors. So if you choose to go to a college visit, just keep in mind you're doing college business for 30 minutes and then you can get on to the other social parts of your day. So I'm going to pause on the visits for a moment and talk a little bit about testing. So when I say testing, I mean the ACT or the SAT, the two major college admission tests. And this is what I'm getting some of the most questions about from students or parents in the junior class right now, which makes sense because it is one of the more confusing and evolving pieces of the process. This is also something in the news. I will start by saying to parents, if you haven't had a child apply to college lately, or even if you have, I will say the role of of testing and college admission has really changed. Certainly since we applied, where it was sort of expected that everybody was submitting a transcript and a test score. That is not the case now. And it might even have shifted a little bit since some of your older kids applied to school. There's a lot more nuance in the process. Not everyone has to test, full stop. And it can be extremely valuable with some specific institutions. So we don't know yet which of you will pursue testing, what schools you're going to be applying to, what they might ask for. But I can say sort of unequivocally that no one should be taking an ACT or an SAT this fall on the record. This is something that you should be thinking about doing later in this year. And so some of the questions I'm getting right now are, when should we start prep? What's happening? What's going on with testing? And I understand the urge to kind of like check this box and kind of get it out of the way sooner rather than later. But I will say that it's generally for most students not curricularly appropriate to be doing the test in the next few weeks or months because you've got content this year in your math and English classes in particular that will be useful for you. And there's no point in sort of putting the cart before the horse with test prep if you haven't been exposed to some concepts yet in class. And depending on your learning profile, you might not have to endure the prep and the expense and all this sort of stuff if you're applying to test optional schools, which some of you ultimately, that may be your whole list. Places with strong learning support, as you can imagine, tend to have a strong correlation with not requiring standardized testing, right? Because it's in sort of their values and their mission in terms of the types of students they serve. And of course, for everyone, we won't know if you need testing based on your list until we start having a list. And I will say since COVID, maybe a third of the senior class or so has done no testing at all. And this has been a lot easier since the UCs and the CSUs became test-free with the ACT and the SAT back in like 2021. So they still take AP scores, and that's the kind of testing that I think can be more useful and relevant for everyone. But these are all questions that we need to answer before we dive into which test and all of that. So my advice as of today is to hold up on the test prep for now and stick to the general JCHS timeline, which is as follows. we will have more free practice testing this fall. So you took the PSAT last October. You're going to do it again this year. It's the practice SAT. I think it's a Friday this year in October, the 3rd, I think. And it's the same thing where we don't have classes that day. The whole sophomore and junior class is taking the PSAT, while first years are doing some community service, and seniors can opt into taking an SAT at JCHS. We'll then a month later practice the ACT. And this is optional, but it is strongly recommended. And it'll be offered on a Sunday, November 2nd. This will be a virtual test because all these tests are now online. And you'll have that whole day to decide when you want to take the test, but it will be proctored by the folks at Compass Education Prep. And with those 2 practice test scores, then when we start meeting in December, we will see what we've got, how you felt about both tests. Did you do better? Was your score stronger, sort of with, as a baseline data point with one test over another? And what's your testing history? Are you generally a strong test taker? Not so much. What's your learning profile, schools you're considering? And we'll make a plan from there. I will say all colleges take both the ACT and the SAT, which may also be a difference for some parents from when we were applying. But I think it's great because they are a little different in format, content, timing, all the rest. So some play to some students' strengths, some to another. So we also want to do this diagnostic testing to get a sense of how you'll put your best foot forward. And then you can prep. You can take the test in the late winter, the spring, the summer, again into the fall of senior year, or not, depending on what your testing pathway is. So if you have other thoughts, questions about testing, I'm going to just throw in the chat here. Compass Education Prep is a really great partner with us. I find them to be amongst the most ethical test prep companies. They do a lot of stuff pro bono. They do a lot of, so they offer these free webinars multiple times throughout the year just to give a general update on what's happening like today with standardized testing. So they keep track of who is going back to being test required, who's still test optional, all the rest. And as we get closer to that launch in December, I'm going to really encourage everyone to try and watch one of their webinars to just get an overview of what's happening up to the minute with testing. Okay, we're so close to me stopping talking, you guys. So in terms of events, I'll just say again, we've got those practice tests in the fall. We will have our college kickoff on December 3rd. And then the last resource I just want to make you aware of is College Money Method. We started partnering with them a few years ago. This is an organization run by Paul Martin, who's based down in Miami, Florida, but actually partners with a group of us in the Bay Area and great secondary schools all over the country to provide some financial advice, framework, overview in a real set curriculum. He offers 6 sessions for us throughout the year, all online, and then he records them and has a whole web page for us with a lot of extra resources. And each of his sessions are directed towards different parts of the process, different years in high school. And so you will be invited to things periodically that would be relevant to you at the moment that you're at. If you are on your first child to college, you haven't done this before, or if you haven't given any thought to financial aid, I will say what he's going to do a basic overview on November 11th that's geared mostly towards freshman families, but anyone can sit in on it. And these Zooms are always at 6:30 p.m. And I have these on the college advising calendar. I'll send calendar invites out, but I strongly recommend at least doing the basic overview so you're understanding terminology and all the rest. And then there'll be something specific for junior families in December on the 9th about loans and borrowing and just understanding that landscape. And we'll have some more things along the way around whether it's merit aid. He does some live completing the FAFSA, completing the CSS profile workshops once you're in senior year and doing those forms. So he's a really great resource if you're going to need any kind of aid, whether that's need-based or whether you're really hoping for some merit or scholarship aid. So be aware of him as well. And then one last thing before I start taking some questions. So think about what you want to know about. If you would like to be a college advising nerd like Miss Cook, you can also start reading the JCHS College Advising Handbook, which I've just put a link to in the chat. It's 30 pages of college advising advice. And while I don't recommend that anyone sit down and read it all the way through, it is designed for, you to figure out, okay, my kid's doing an interview in 2 weeks. What do I need to know about interviewing? Go to page 14 for whatever it is to read about sample interview questions. You can read it all the way through, and I spent a lot of time on it, to be honest. But there's a lot of just, you can do the sections you need at the times that you might need them. And the first few pages have some timelines for you just to sort of loosely think about what you should be doing when. So if you're curious, if you're behind, if you're ahead, I would check the timelines and make sure you're just kind of keeping an eye on all of that. And read my emails, and everything's gonna go swimmingly. So I'm going to stop talking now and see, well, for a moment anyway, see what you might have questions about. And this can be students, this can be parents. You're welcome to type something in the chat. You can also raise your Zoom hand. You don't even have to turn on your camera. I don't need to see you if you're eating dinner, but it's always nice to see faces. So any questions from folks at this point?
I have a question on test timing. I think you kind of said not in the next, you said later in the year, but like around when should testing happen? And then how often do we need to be on top of it, like scheduling it? Is
Great
it pretty
questions.
hard to get time, for testing? Like,
Yep. Yep. So the very first thing I would say for anyone who might have accommodations, access learning support at all, now would be the time to consider the last time you did some diagnostic testing. And if something needs to be updated, that's one thing to be thinking about now. If the last time a student was assessed was like middle school, you might need to re-up that testing. So if you want accommodations, 50% time or any of that from College Board or ACT, to be talking with Dr. Neufeld about that now, because it can take a little while to get approved for those things. And the very earliest that I think most sort of advanced juniors, so if you have some higher PSAT scores or higher ACT scores, and with the SAT, I would say that's kind of like a 1350 or above at this point, which is super rare, which is why most people don't do this. Maybe you're taking a test in December or February, but really February, March, April, that's kind of the first time that people might sit down for an ACT or an SAT. And so it's plenty of time if we sit down in December and have our one-on-one, start talking about how you felt about the practice test, to then think, okay, we do think we need to test. It's going to be the ACT. Why don't we book you an April date and a June date, and then start backfilling when you might want to start prep and thinking about that through spring semester. So spring semester of junior year is the general time people get started. But everybody kind of has their own prescription based on where they're at, what their approach is. And I'm really fortunate that we've got small classes at JCHS and I can be working with each of you individually. So I'm also going to say, please don't take each other's prescriptions. If you hear that someone's taking it in March and I've said to you, I think June is the first time you should do it, stick with June, because these things are not transferable or universal across folks. And I would say most people take it 2 times, maybe 3. I think once you get beyond 3, you start to see like the law of diminishing returns. And there is a natural testing ceiling for most folks where you're not going to punch much higher after 3, God forbid, 4 sittings. So I think that, doing something in the spring and then maybe over the summer or early fall, that can be 2 times that are solid. And you still could do something in the middle of the fall, a third sitting, and have that score back by early deadlines if you're thinking about applying somewhere early. So again, we'll make a little bit firmer of a plan come December, but that's the general time frame.
and how long before the test do you start the test prepping?
Yeah, ideally, this is a short and concentrated effort. This should not be like a new extracurricular that someone's doing for months, right? So I think 6 to 8 weeks is pretty great. If you are really shooting for the moon and you're starting from a really low place, you might want to do more than that. We might be talking about more like, 10 weeks or something. But I think 6 to 8 is pretty typical and completely sufficient. And really what prep often means is doing some content, either in a class or one-on-one with a tutor, and then taking a practice test, and then reviewing what you did wrong, content, take another practice test. And you're kind of going back and forth so that you are, working on the skills that you might not be getting right on the test, but it's also about learning your timing, emotional regulation, right? Like just getting in the testing zone and trying to feel like it becomes a little bit more routine. You're anticipating the timing and all of that. So it's content and it's just going through the motions. So I hope that helps. Got some questions in the chat. Yeah, when do we sign up for the actual SAT? Again, I would be saving registration until we get to December, January, and we're making some decisions on things. Now, I will say since COVID, there has been a scramble to get seats for testing for the past few years. I watched that loosen up quite a bit in the past year. I think the test companies are finally being more responsive to demand picking back up. So I have found with the class of 2026 that we're not having as many people saying, I think I have to go to Reno, or I need to fly to LA for a test. That even if it's a couple weeks before a sitting, College Board will send out an alert saying like, we just booked 2 ballrooms at the, SFO Hilton. And so now there's more seats you can sign up for. So I don't think we have to be quite as panicked as we might have been in the past about getting a seat, but I'm always getting vibes from my peers at other schools and keeping an eye on this. So if I do see that we're hitting a crunch again, I might send something out to the class just to say proactively, just save yourself a seat. And if you cancel it, need to get a refund, not a huge deal. So I'll keep you posted, but I think we're in a more rational realm as we go into your class's process. Also have a question about what are the questions like on the SAT versus ACT? Are they like an AP test? This is a very in-depth question. And so I will say, definitely go do a Compass webinar if you're interested more in depth on all of that. They also have a whole, and it's like a 50 or 60 page guide that they can send you a paper copy of, but it's also a PDF on their website that they refresh every year. And they literally will go section by section with each of those tests. They have heat maps on them about like in the math section of the ACT, it slowly gets harder, and you can see that. Or on the math section of the SAT, they're constantly moving back and forth between hard questions and easy questions. So I would absolutely jump on the Compass website and look at their resources there for some more granular data. But I can say generally, the ACT has an optional science section that's a little different that you don't have on the SAT. And the SAT generally tends to be more algebraic historically, and the ACT focuses a little bit more on geometry. But other than that, if you want to get more granular, jump on the Compass website. Okay, question about how will our kid know if a college might be a fit from a website or meeting with a rep? What a great question. I think you can start to get some vibes, some feelings, and I think that no rep is trying to sell their college necessarily to everyone. I think they understand that most places have some types of students that fit better than others, whether it's because they're in a super urban location, they might be more rural, they might have a more liberal bend. They might, have a real outdoorsy sort of, nature to them. So I do think some of the general overviews can give a student a sense of maybe, or I don't think this is for me. But, there are, a lot of the liberal arts colleges can sound very similar in size, similar in approach. So that's where I would also then think about hopping onto YouTube and seeing if there are some students that are doing like day in the life kind of videos. I highly recommend that FISC Guide to Colleges because it's not written by college admission offices. It's written, the folks at FISC Guide send questionnaires out to students and faculty and alumni from colleges, and that's how they build their descriptions. So It's not quite the sort of shiny, everything sounds great sort of sales pitch. It is more like, this is a place for nerdy folks. We're in the library on Friday night and we love it. Or, this is a place where Greek life is super big. And if you're not into partying, then that might not be for you. So the FIS Guide's going to give you a little bit more of a sense of culture and social life and all of that that can be useful as well. But I do think nothing really replaces a campus visit. And you don't have to visit every school you're looking at before you apply. But I think doing a couple of types of school visits can help you start to gain some preferences. I often say to folks, it's like when I was looking to purchase my first house, and it wasn't until I went and toured a couple of houses that I was like, oh, I don't want somebody's carpet that might feel like sort of gross and used to me. I think I might want hardwood floor, right? And it wasn't until I was in the space and like experiencing my own personal preferences that I thought, okay, I'm now, making a list of and delineating some things that feel important to me. And there's other stuff that might not be important to you, and that's fine too. But this is going to, again, be a long-term project. So I think we need to be collecting information, and please feel free to come and process with me after you visit places, because I'm always able to, I think, reflect back what I'm hearing in terms of highlights and lowlights, even if the student themselves might feel a little scrambled on it. So other questions? These are good ones.
I got another one. What's your meeting cadence like with the students? Like,
Mhm.
throughout junior year, is anything happening before the summer of senior year and then the fall?
Yep. So everybody, and by everybody, I mean students, all students are required to meet with me in the December, January timeframe. That's our first launch meeting. They are required to meet with me again before the end of the school year, before we're out for the summer. And then the times in between there, I am happy if they want to come check in regularly and sit down and chat as they go visit places, thinking about things. Some students after that first meeting are like, wow, 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 this is so much, and need to just like sit back for a few weeks and not make eye contact with me in the hallway, and that's okay. But they do have those two required meetings. And then families are also welcome often, after I have that first meeting, and I do want to just meet one-on-one with students first. Then often we'll all get together, and whether that's, parents on Zoom and the student in my office, or we're all together in my office to just kind of talk about things we're thinking and make sure we're on the same page. And then I work through the summer. I am on a 12-month contract. So while most of my faculty colleagues are out running around the globe, I am often here in my kitchen and I work at home, but I do make myself available all summer. And it's more often about starting to work on writing at that point or answering some application questions. I do some Zooms as folks go to visit places. And then now I just sent an email to all the seniors today saying, start booking your meetings with me if you haven't already. And I keep a big spreadsheet on every class. So students, if you do avoid me for a while, at some point, the chickens will come home to roost, because I am wanting to make sure everyone is hitting all the markers they need to hit. So you will be assigned some meetings with Ms. Cook and fetched back to my office at some point, so I know what's going on with you. And in the fall of senior year, it's really as much as folks need. So I can't see everyone every week because I'm also hosting the college visits. We've got the Hagim, but I'm seeing folks pretty regularly. And if you receive any help from learning support, Dr. Neufeld, is also available to help read over essays and whatnot. English teachers, end of junior year and into senior year, are also there to help with essays. And yeah, and then I find by January and all the applications are out the door, the seniors suddenly they ghost me and it's all about the junior class. So that's kind of the rhythm of things. And then it picks back up again when decisions hit throughout the month of March, and we make some final decisions in April. And by May 1, you have to have committed to a college in senior year. So that's the scope of things. But again, I love that it's a small enough institution that as stuff comes up, and WOW has stuff come up, whether it's COVID, whether it's October 7th, as things are impacting student college choices, we pivot and we add sessions and we figure things out. And I'm here to help. So, yeah. There's a question about, do I ever just meet with parents? I absolutely do. And whether that's you emailing me to say, my child is not speaking to me about this, will you tell me what's going on? Sorry, kids, but I will do that and just sort of let that whether, markers are being hit or if there's anything we need to think about. If you've got, things you want to chat with me about or things contextually I should know about, absolutely. So, yes, and we can do that on Zoom. We can do that in person, whatever works best for you. And really, anytime once we're into December on, my appointment calendar is always in the signature of my email. It's in the portal, and there's a QR code on my office door if you're at school, so you can always find it there as well. But I am happy to chat with whoever needs me. So, yeah. Other questions? Excellent. Well, juniors, know that you have a class meeting, I believe, the first day of school. I think I've got the seniors on Friday, and that will mostly be Rabbi Buchan, but I will be making a special guest appearance. And I'm really excited about the school year. I think it's going to be great. And please email me in the next few weeks as questions come up. I'm happy to answer them. And I'm really looking forward to seeing folks in college visits and getting things rolling as we go through the year.